Hello Halo fans, welcome back to the channel where I talk about everything Halo. From story-based lore theories to online arena multiplayer, every part of the beloved Halo series is extraordinary in its own right. Today's video is one I'm super excited to share because it includes one of, if not the most anticipated and cryptic characters in the Halo series. But before I reveal who that is, let's talk about the extremely smug and incoherently frustrating lightbulb many fans know as 343 Guilty Spark.
Please, don't shake the light bulb.
343 Guilty Spark is a character we have seen and interacted directly with since Halo Combat Evolved. His story arc through the original trilogy shapes and represents his role as the monitor of Installation 04, the first Halo ring we encounter in the first game, and his role of assisting humanity as the reclaimers to all Forerunner technology. What many people don't know, however, is the history of this character and how he came to be. But before I go into this theory, and for prior warning, in this theory video I will be going over events that occur in the Halo books Smoke and Shadow, as well as the book Halo Renegades, which released earlier this year. Even after watching this video, I highly recommend reading these books due to their nature of covering topics like Covenant species integration into outer colonies and their friendly interactions with humanity. I'm going to start this video off with talking about the history of Guilty Spark. For those of you who want to jump straight to the theory, I'll have a timestamp in the description below. Without going into too much detail, the story of Guilty Spark begins with an ancient human who lived prior to the firing of the Halo Ray known as Chakas or Chakas. The human Chakas was mortally wounded during a maneuver via the Halo ring Installation 07, one of the other Halo rings that is also believed to be the ring in the Halo Infinite Discover Hope trailer. This maneuver was to avoid collision with a planet during a confrontation with Mendicant Bias, a character I will explain more about later in this video. In an attempt to save his consciousness, the Isodiadact, not the one we see in Halo 4, Bornstellar transferred his consciousness and memories into a monitor housing. Deemed a new name in the title of 343 Guilty Spark, Chakas was an important character in the decision for the firing of the Halo Array, and as a result was left to watch over Installation 04, the ring Chief first encounters him on. Here, Spark witnesses the firing of the Halo Array, and sometime around 8000 BC, an unknown ship crashed on the Halo ring. With no living entity leaving the ship, and only a short-range distress beacon, Guilty Spark, in order to keep the location of the ring a secret, ceased their communications and eventually entombed the ship. If you guys are interested in this event, feel free to check out my video here or check out the link in the video description below. Bringing his story timeline to the events of the original trilogy, Spark had been alone on the installation for 100,000 years, short of the brief encounter with the unknown ship that is, until his contact with the Pillar of Autumn at the beginning of Halo Combat Evolved. In this game, at the end of the first level, we can see the Pillar of Autumn crash land on Halo, and after rescuing Marines near his own landing, Chief then begins a mission to rescue Captain Keyes. During this mission, the Truth and Reconciliation, which is both the name of the level and the name of the Covenant ship Keyes is being held on, Chief is given a broad explanation of what the Halo ring is and a new mission by Captain Keyes.
That's true. The Covenant kept saying that whoever controls Halo controls the fate of the universe.
Now I see. I have intercepted a number of messages about a Covenant search team scouting for a control room. I thought they were looking for the bridge of a cruiser that I damaged during the battle above the ring. But they must be looking for Halo's control room.
That's bad news. If Halo is a weapon, and the Covenant gain control of it, they'll use it against us and wipe out the entire human race. Chief, Cortana, I have a new mission for you. We need to beat the Covenant to Halo's control room.
At the end of this level, Chief escapes the Covenant ship with Keyes. The following two levels are in direct accordance with this mission I just spoke of. The first mission, the Silent Cartographer, is a hunt for the map room that will lead Chief to Halo's control room, and the level after, as the name implies, is Chief's assault on the newfound control room location. When Chief finally reaches the control room, his AI companion Cortana immediately begins compiling vast quantities of information after being inserted into the control room console. Before the player is ever informed or exposed to the Flood, Cortana frantically realizes the imminent threat it poses to the galaxy with her newfound information, and knowing the Covenant have already released them on the Halo ring, skips any explanation to instead instruct Chief to stop Captain Keyes in his search for a weapons cache. Here, on the appropriately named level 343 Guilty Spark, Chief has his first encounter with the Flood, and just prior to his extraction from the containment facility, is introduced to and teleported away by none other than the floating blue light bulb. Again, with little to no explanation, Chief and Spark now embark on the mission through one of the most painful levels in Halo Combat Evolved, the Library. Here, the activation key or index for the Halo ring can be retrieved and used to combat the Flood. Upon securing the index in the library and returning to the control room of the Halo ring, this important cutscene plays where Cortana explains what the Halo installation actually does and ridicules Chief for the mass destruction he almost commits. But what I want to point out here is the dialogue that Spark exchanges with Chief about the ring and its purpose.
That's exactly what Halo is designed to do. Wipe the galaxy clean of all sentient life. You don't believe me? Ask him.
Is it true?
More or less. Technically, this installation's pulse has a maximum effective radius of 25,000 light years. But once the others follow suit, this galaxy will be quite devoid of life. Or at least any life with sufficient biomass to sustain the flood. But you already knew that. I mean, how couldn't you?
Left out that little detail, did he?
We have followed outbreak containment procedure to the letter. You were with me each step of the way as we managed this crisis.
Chief, I'm picking up movement.
Why would you hesitate to do what you've already done?
We need to go right now.
Last time you asked me, if it were my choice, would I do it? Having had considerable time to ponder your query, my answer has not changed. There is no choice. We must activate the ring.
This dialogue that Spark says is very odd to the first-time Halo player, and until the Forerunner trilogy books have been released, the reasoning for this choice in dialogue was shrouded in mystery. With the Forerunner book trilogy now giving the backstory of Chakas and his transformation into Guilty Spark, we can see that Guilty Spark is confused in memory. As mentioned before, Spark or Chakas was present during the firing of the Halo array with Bornstellar. Subsequently, when Spark was confused and says to Chief,
Last time you asked me, if it were my choice, would I do it? Having had considerable time to ponder your query, my answer has not changed. There is no choice. We must activate the ring.
this is actually him recollecting the events of the decision to fire the Halo array 100,000 years prior with Bornstellar. Furthermore, this is reassured by the previous question and confusion Spark directs to Chief about his lack of knowledge of what activating the Halo array actually does.
But you already knew that. I mean, how couldn't you?
Following this cutscene and through the rest of Halo Combat Evolved, Spark works in direct opposition to Chief and eventually fails in his mission to activate the ring to destroy the Flood, this being caused by the destruction of Chief with the Pillar of Autumn. Oddly enough, throughout the next two Halo games, Spark works not only with the Covenant, but humanity in hopes of eradicating the Flood. Chief himself is even caught off guard by this when Spark attempts to assist him with Cortana's message in Halo 3.
On Halo, you tried to kill Cortana. You tried to kill me.
For almost the rest of the game, Guilty Spark assists Chief and humanity in their endeavor to stop Truth from firing the Halo array at the Ark, and eventually to activate the recently reconstructed Halo ring, Installation 04B, or the replacement for the ring we destroy in the first game. Here, Guilty Spark informs the group attempting to activate the Halo ring that the installation is not yet ready to fire, but instead will require a few more days, and that firing will result in the destruction of the ring and possibly the Ark. The group, unable to follow this request to wait, decides to activate the ring anyway, and as a result, Guilty Spark again turns hostile towards humanity and Chief in defense of his newly rebuilt installation. It was at this point it was believed that Spark met his end with the destruction of his monitor unit and the activation of Installation 04B. However, with the release of the novel Halo Primordium, it is revealed that Spark survived these events and is recovered by the ship, the UNSC Rubicon. In this book, Spark is interrogated and reveals his history prior to the monitor of Installation 04, all the while injecting himself into the ship's computers. After his interrogation, Spark powered down and his monitor casing was ejected into space. Unknown to the crew, he had already transferred his consciousness into the shipboard computers. After subduing the ship's onboard AI and taking control of the ship, he explained to the crew that he was going to find the librarian and restore his friends, asserting that the librarian was in fact alive, and while in control of the Rubicon, Spark proceeded to put the crew into cryosleep and travel to the shield world known as Etrin Harbridge. This being the shield world from the game Halo Wars that is destroyed by the UNSC, the Spirit of Fire, over 20 years earlier in 2531. Before Spark could make it to the shield world, complications arose, and as a result, the Rubicon crashed into the planet known as Gyaranos A, killing everyone on board except Spark, who transferred himself into an armiger as seen on the cover of the book Halo Renegades. This was the last anyone had come into contact with Spark until 2557. Moving on to the events of the novels Halo Smoke and Shadow and Halo Renegades, these books tell the story of the ship known as the Ace of Spades and its crew. This ship, captained by Ryan Forge, the daughter of Sergeant Forge from Halo Wars, is a salvage vessel that begins a mission to find the lost ship, the UNSC Spirit of Fire. Throughout these two books, Ryan Forge and her crew follow clues in a salvage ship from an early Human Covenant War conflict, and a buoy that was left by the Spirit of Fire prior to their jump to the Shield World. After collecting the buoy and following the Spirit of Fire's last known trajectory, the Ace of Spades ends up at the remnants of the destroyed Shield World from Halo Wars. Here, they recover a fragment of an old Forerunner AI that names itself Littlebit. This AI informs them of the arrival of the Spirit of Fire, but due to most of its memory being lost in the destruction of the Shield World, is unable to inform them of all the details that took place. What it does know is that the Spirit of Fire survived the events, and its prediction of the Spirit of Fire's last known trajectory, this concluding the events of Halo Smoke and Shadow. As we move to Renegades, the crew of the Ace of Spades continues its mission to find the Spirit of Fire, but is intercepted by ONI, or ONI. The Office of Naval Intelligence, who prides itself on making decisions for the betterment of humanity, during their interception and capture of the ship the Ace of Spades, revokes all information pertaining to the Spirit of Fire from them, as well as almost all of their personal items. In quick thinking, Ryan Forge uses a glove that is able to record information from anything computer-related it touches, and during her capture, she uses it multiple times, not knowing what information she will record. After her release and return to the Ace of Spades, she reveals the information that she captured and formulates a plan to blackmail Oni for their valuables back. The information captured by the glove led the Ace of Spades to none other than the crash site of the ship, the UNSC Rubicon, on the planet Gyranos A, and unbeknownst to the crew, the lifeless body of Guilty Spark who awaited them. Committing a similar act to the events of the Rubicon, Spark integrates himself into the Ace of Spades systems. Shortly thereafter, Spark reveals himself to the crew in his armature form and forms an uneasy alliance with them. At this point, Spark still wants to continue his mission to find the librarian and reunite with his friends, and takes the Ace of Spades and its crew unknowingly back to the wreckage of Etrin Harbridge, and again is almost captured by Oni. Narrowly escaping, Spark instead takes the crew to a different location where he will be able to upgrade the Ace of Spades with Forerunner technology. The crew then uses this upgrade to engage their plan against Oni. Taking a fragmented piece of Spark and loading it into a data core, the Ace of Spades agrees to meet with Oni in a location not under their jurisdiction. Here, they elude Oni by receiving their personal belongings back and handing over the small fragmented piece of Spark. Unfortunately, Oni attempts to recapture the crew of the Ace of Spades during this meeting, but fails, and the crew narrowly escapes with Guilty Spark and their belongings. With the fulfillment of their end of the bargain, the crew of the Ace of Spades accompanies Spark to East Africa on Earth near the portal to the Ark from Halo 3. Spark then leads the crew into a secret cave in Mount Kilimanjaro, where they discover the portal that Spark was searching for while unknowingly being tracked by Oni. This portal device, similar to the one Chief finds in Halo 4, is a means by which to communicate with the leftover essence of the librarian. Originally planning to betray the crew and leave them to be captured by Oni, Spark makes a decision after his conversation with the librarian not to leave Earth with her essence. He instead chooses his own path now that he has fulfilled his role as the Monitor and loyally served the librarian until the end. Shortly after his conversation with the librarian's essence, Spark assists the crew to escape back to the Ace of Spades, where they then leave Earth, and the fate of the crew of the Ace of Spades, as stated by the writers, was, quote, "intentionally left open for at least one more book about Spark's redemption," end quote. This concludes the events of Halo Smoke and Shadow and Halo Renegades. Now, with all of that backstory and information filled in on 343 Guilty Spark, or Chakas, I want to examine the conversation that Spark has with the essence of the librarian, as well as information we learn late in the book Renegades. During Spark's conversation with the librarian, she gives Spark a small etched box with carvings on it that she calls a key, and asks him to find what is missing. She then says, "Fix the path, right what my kind has turned wrong." Unfortunately, while I have no further evidence to speculate on this particular key piece, the only thing that comes to mind is the Janus key, a piece of Forerunner technology that cataloged and gives the real-time location of all Forerunner technology. This can be seen here in Spartan Ops and other appearances in the Halo Escalation comic books.
This is the Janus key. It offers the real-time location of every piece of Forerunner technology in the galaxy.
Every piece.
We did not create so much without a means to catalog it all.
During the same period of time as this conversation, Spark's fragment that was deliberately given to Oni by the crew of the Ace of Spades during their exchange was dealing havoc on the Oni base it was taken back to, and it is revealed later in the book that it was looking for data concerning, quote, "repeated intrusion by an unknown catalog that started in 2552, end quote. Making some time correlations with this year to events that took place in the Halo games, I want to look at the possibility of who or what this intrusion was that Spark's fragment was looking for and why he was looking for it. Knowing that the Office of Naval Intelligence would almost undoubtedly have some of the best security known to mankind, the level of intelligence or ability the intruding catalog has must be equal to or higher than functions of that of Oni. At the time of this intrusion, the current events taking place in the Halo universe were that of Halo 2, which, speaking of, leads me to my thoughts and theory of who this catalog might actually be. During Halo 2 on the level High Charity, Cortana says this line of dialogue.
I'll do what I can to slow the launch sequence. There's something inside the ship, a presence, fighting back. For a Covenant construct, it's unusually formidable.
For those of you who don't know, Covenant AI or constructs are very few and far in between. The Covenant, unlike humanity at the time, knew the reason and story of the fall of the Forerunners, this being due to the betrayal of the Contender class AI known as Mendicant Bias. The Forerunners were eventually almost entirely consumed by the flood, and it resulted to the firing of the Halo rings. For information and backstory on this, as well as a nice basis for the rest of this theory, I recommend you guys check out my video here on Cortana and why she might not have the logic play where I explained this history. There will also be a link in the description below. Moving on with the theory, it has been confirmed that the presence Cortana spoke of in that level was a fragment of Mendicant bias that had been in possession of the Covenant for many years in the dreadnought that powered the Covenant Holy City High Charity. Following with the history of Mendicant from my referenced video just a moment ago, this fragment was one of the many pieces on its way back to the Ark that Mendicant bias was split into after his betrayal and defeat, with only one piece actually making it back to the Ark. As we see throughout extended Halo lore, Mendicant bias attempts to take control of the ship, but is stopped by the hunter worms inside the ship and isolated before being able to do so, thereby leaving him powerless until Halo 2, where his desire to leave High Charity, for reasons I will go into here in a minute, fights Cortana, who is attempting to delay the launch sequence for Truth in his mission to Earth. Looking at the end of Halo 2, we know this Forerunner dreadnought makes its way back to Earth, and coincidentally, the portal in East Africa near the Oni base mentioned in the book Renegades. Eventually, this ship again leaves to another location of interest in Halo 3, the Ark. For those of you who have played Halo 3, there is an achievement you can obtain known as Marathon Man. This achievement is unlocked by accessing all of the terminals in Halo 3. Oddly enough, in these terminals, some strange occurrences happen. In the middle of accessing a terminal and reading through it, you are cut off by an unknown source that is labeled Rogue Process, and there are quick lines of red text all over the screen. Players with a keen eye were able to see that in these walls of text, there was more than just lines of code. Throughout these terminals, these hidden messages appear multiple times, and by the last terminal, we are able to conclude that we are seeing messages from none other than Mendicant bias. In these messages, specifically on the level of the Covenant and at the first tower, there is a terminal on a ledge across from the elevator that will take you to the top of the tower. This is the fourth terminal in its sequence, and one of the hidden messages that is presented I've circled here. The message reads, "I found the shard that was lost. They brought it back to me. Now my reconstitution cannot be stopped." Taking a look at the information I've already presented, I believe it's clear that what Mendicant bias is referring to is the fragment of himself on the Forerunner dreadnought that the Prophet of Truth uses to travel to the Ark from Earth. With this new piece now returned, Mendicant bias was able to overcome the security that held him in place, and we can see it in the 6th terminal with this message, "I win." Now, rewinding a little bit back to the time-date correlation I spoke of, Truth landed the Forerunner dreadnought that powered High Charity on the uncovered portal to the Ark in Africa on November 17th, 2552. This puts it exactly in line with the date mentioned in Halo Renegades. Is it possible that, similar to Guilty Spark, Mendicant bias also split a fragment of himself into the systems of the portal at Earth and subsequently was able to intrude the Oni base? This idea could be backed by a number of factors. Guilty Spark, having himself lived through the time prior to the firing of the Halo Ray, would almost certainly know of Mendicant bias in his condemnation. By the time of the 3 novels I've spoken of in this video, and the recollection of his memories after the events of Halo 3, his time spent on the Ark, and even High Charity, I would say that it is more than probable that Spark knew Mendicant bias was on the Forerunner dreadnought and was searching for the trail of his actions on Earth. Something that many Halo theorists might look to in opposition to this theory would be the destruction of the Ark in Installation 04B at the end of Halo 3. But taking this into account, and with the new addition of the books and information I have referenced in this video, if Guilty Spark, in such a fragile state after his conflict with Master Chief, survived the event, would it be impossible to consider that Mendicant bias has also survived? Should this be the case, the following question would be, what is Mendicant bias's plan? For this question, I want to look at 2 pieces of possible evidence. The first piece of evidence lies in the introduction cutscene to Halo Wars 2. In this cutscene, Professor Anders and Captain Cutter from Halo Wars have a brief discussion about their arrival at the Ark.
Look at it.
What is it? And where are we?
No idea. Our astronavigation system can't pinpoint a location. We're not on the map anymore.
We didn't drift out of the galaxy in 28 years, Professor. Since records show we arrived via slip space less than an hour ago.
Our slip space drive is gone. However we got here, it wasn't us who initiated the trip.
Oddly, this subject of the Spirit of Fire's arrival at the Ark is entirely neglected throughout the rest of the game, and while many people say the reasoning for it was just an easy solution to rejoin the Spirit of Fire with humanity, I believe there is more to the story than that. Knowing the nature of Atriox and the Banished, I cannot formulate any good reason for why or how he would know the Spirit of Fire's position to pull them to the Ark, or why he would want them there. This leads me to believe that this event was the doing of a more cryptic character, one that does not openly make himself known. For my second piece of evidence, I want to look at the final terminal of Halo 3. Throughout these terminals, we read the story of incidents in the Forerunner Flood conflict prior to the firing of the Halo rings, and direct communications between the Didact from Halo 4 and the Librarian during that time. The final communication we see between the two is the Didact attempting to send a final message to the Librarian, letting her know of Mendicant's efforts to stop the Halo array from firing and his hatred for him. This communication is cut short, and all records between the two cease. Like every other terminal, now that we know Mendicant Bias has control over some of the ARC systems, and has been this rogue process showing us these messages, there is a final red screen cutaway and a hidden message that states, quote, "I'll tell you who I am Mendicant Bias. This is what I have done." When accessing the final terminal on the level Halo, the following text you see is dependent on the difficulty you access this terminal on. In order to see this text, you must be on Legendary difficulty. The next 3 pages talk about the difficulty of Mendicant Bias trying to communicate with Chief, his betrayal to the Forerunners during the Forerunner Flood War, and last but certainly not least, his desire for atonement through Chief. Feel free to pause and read these pages now, or feel free to check them out yourself later. Now, coming to a conclusion on this theory, I want to culminate all the information presented in this video with my final assessment. Knowing that Spark survived the events of Halo 3, and furthermore his plan to be in the future Halo lore by the authors of the book Smoke and Shadow and Halo Renegades, as well as the possibilities stated of Mendicant Bias also surviving, causing trouble on Earth, or even bringing the Spirit of Fire to the Ark, I believe that Spark will actively be looking for fragments of Mendicant Bias in the future to combat the Flood and to help him achieve his atonement by assisting humanity to obtain the mantle as they should have originally before the Forerunners destroyed the precursors. This last speculation comes from the Halo Infinite trailer, where the Halo ring that is believed to be Zeta Halo, the location where Mendicant Bias studied the Primordial for a short time, before leaving and being converted by the Flood. Well, that's going to be it for this Halo theory video. Please let me know what you guys think about this theory or even your own theory about Guilty Spark and whether or not he is looking for Mendicant Bias in the comment section below. Also, make sure to include any other topics you guys might want me to cover for a future video. If you enjoyed the video, please remember to like and subscribe for future content, and if you guys ever want to message me directly about anything Halo, feel free to message me on my Instagram with the link in the description below. Be sure to check out my podcast every Wednesday where I cover more about my Halo theories, multiplayer, and guest personal opinion on everything Halo. Lastly, if anyone is interested, I do custom game nights every week from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time Friday and 12 a.m. to 3 p.m. Sunday. If you would like to join, just make sure to subscribe here on YouTube and check my Instagram link in the description for the dates. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you theorists next time.